Hello, this is Jamie Mitchell, and we are back for another episode of the Libertarian Uncensored podcast, going over all the posts on the Libertarian Uncensored subreddit. Let's get right into it. So first we have China executes billionaires for corruption as well from Ragnar OKXG, and that's a cross post from the Public Freakout subreddit, and it was entitled "Just the President of the United States Executing We Start Executing Drug Dealers." And yeah, personally, I'm against the death penalty for everyone, regardless of the crime they have committed, but I don't think the state should be taking away people's autonomy, even if even if the murderers have taken away other people's autonomy. But ultimately, it comes down to who has the force to do what. So if I do think a lot of people who got the death penalty probably do deserve it because they're very anti-libertarian and have justified using force against those who were unable to use force back. But regardless, I don't think it's the state's job to be executing those people. I think that gives them too much power, and the libertarian perspective is to give the state as less power as possible. So that's my thoughts there. I personally would disagree with executing murderers, not even going to drug dealers or billionaires. A lot of those guys, a lot of murderers probably deserve it. A lot of drug dealers probably deserve it. Heck, probably a decent number of billionaires probably deserve it as well. But with that being said, it's not libertarian, and that's my thoughts there. Then we have President Trump openly threatens the governor of Maine from Donald Key, and that's crossword from the Whistleblower subreddit. And that's from Vince D. Monroy on Twitter, it looks like. Donald Trump, the NCAA has complied immediately, but I understand Maine is Governor of Maine here. Governor Mills, I'm right here. Trump, are you not going to comply with that? Governor Mills, I'm going to comply with state and federal law. Trump, you better, or because you're not going to get any federal funding at all. Governor Mills, see you in court. And I personally wouldn't consider that really a threat. He's not threatening to kill her or anything. It's not really kind of a real threat. It's not like a Reddit threat, kinda. I guess you could say it's threatening to pull funding, but ultimately funding is an entitlement rather than a privilege, and entitlement rather than a right. So I personally wouldn't consider that too much of a threat. But right, it always has to be Orange Man bad, Tesla Man bad, etc., etc. So of course the Reddit's going to make it seem like this is the worst thing ever. Then we have Trump fires top military leaders in unprecedented shakeup from Politico.com, from Dr. Who 07. And yeah, I personally don't really care that much for the military. But yeah, Trump as commander-in-chief can fire whoever he wants to. But yeah, I personally would prefer if the military was the one leading the government rather than the people like Trump, because the military would openly rule by openly is open about its use in the government's role of force. So I personally don't care for it, but at least that's honest, I would say. That's why whenever I looked at how I'd vote in all the past presidential elections, I almost always go for whoever's higher in the U.S. military, because they know how to use the government control of force. And yeah, I personally don't really care for the government control of force, but at the very least, the military is open about it. So that's why, I personally think if Trump wants to fire military leaders for whatever reason he wants to, he should be able to, since, he's in the commander-in-chief. With that being said, he'll probably just put more loyalists in there rather than get rid of the military altogether, which I think would be the libertarian position. You gotta get rid of your military because you can't let the government have force over you. I think the libertarian position is get rid of all law enforcement and military. The state shouldn't be able to use any weapons against you, even if you're actively committing crimes violently, because ultimately it should be the people's job to stop crime and not that of the state. Then we have support the Libertarian Party from FunKale321, and that's a picture, 3 signs you might be libertarian. 1, you envision a world where people are free to experiment with different ways of living, to try new ideas, choose their own paths, and pursue their happiness as long as they do not harm anyone. 2. You believe wars are a devastating force that bring destruction, expand state power, undermine individual freedom, and are often used as justification for the most extreme forms of coercion. 3. You believe that all human interactions should be based on voluntary exchange, in which people are free to engage with one another through mutual consent without force, fraud, or coercion. And I'd agree with all of those. I personally think, if people do want to use force, they should be able to. But I think people will just about to justify. But we shouldn't have a forced collectivist government. Everything should be voluntary collectivist if it is collectivist, not forced collectivist. You can't you can view the government as illegitimate, but they have the legal monopoly on the use of force, and I think that's very much a problem when it comes to libertarianism. Libertarianism is all about the individual, and each individual should have the ability to use force wherever they feel like it. Even if I personally wouldn't agree with the reasons for it, we shouldn't just have one side that has a legal monopoly on the use of force. And that's my thoughts on that issue. Then we have Seeing the Cat versus Doge, Single Taxers Fought for Government Efficiency Before It Was Cool from the DailyRenter.com by Anarcho Federation. They added, long before the lames at Doge, there were real liberal libertarian movements to minimize government bureaucracy and make institutions transparent, simplistic, and efficient. It wasn't an astroturf propaganda to empower corporate elites and concentrate powers in the executive. And yeah, I personally think, Doge is kind of overheated currently. I might not agree with the reasons they're cutting government bureaucracy, but they are at the very least cutting some of it. And with that being said, I do like single taxation as well. Kind of like the Georgian policy of the land value tax. If I personally don't really care for taxation at all, but if there was one tax that we should have, I think it would be the land value tax, because ultimately, who is ever using the resources of land, if the government does want to, the government can force you to pay whatever taxes it wants to. But I do think the most justified one would be a land value tax, because ultimately, each person would pay how much however much land they own. And yeah, that's my thoughts on that issue. Then we have Christina Holmes says $200 million Department of Homeland Security ad campaign thanking Trump was his idea, from MSN.com by CH4Locks. And yeah, that's just, a lot. Trump might say he's a fiscal conservative, cutting back all these government programs, but the government's going to justify throwing that money somewhere else. I saw a good comment from Stone Toss recently that said that it was Elon handing Trump a big bag of money. It says, here's all the money we've saved from Doge, and then Trump just walks over and gives the big bad money to Israel. So, they'll piss away money regardless of which branch of the uniparty is in power, and that's my thoughts on that issue. Then we have Milei, because libertarian head of government are compatible, from Anarcho Federation, and that's a meme. Over 50% of Argentinians live in poverty. Javier Milei, the quote-unquote libertarian, decreased social spending. And the Spectator, it's headline from the Spectator, why is Javier Milei spending more on Argentina's army? And then the original poster added, funny that there are segments of the so-called libertarians who believe there can be such a thing as a libertarian president. And yeah, I guess you could debate about that. I personally think Javier Milei is probably one of the most libertarian a president can get. But you could argue that the idea of being a president at all is inherently unlibertarian, and if you want to think that, I think that's okay. But ultimately, I think the idea of any government position at all is inherently unlibertarian. But ultimately, it exists, so that's the game they put out. You might as well play it, and that's my thoughts on that issue. Then we have, my local and state subs have suddenly banned national politics. Anybody else notice this trend to silence people from talking about certain things? Anyone else notice that in their state and or local subs, from Swamp Yankee Dan? And then they added, I said it in the title. And yeah, it's funny that this guy's complaining about silencing people, because he blocked me recently. Said in response, "You are silenced from my post forever." So a lot of people say, "Oh, I care about free speech," but then you dissent from their official narratives, and they say, "Oh, you're silenced forever, blocked by." And it just goes to show you, people are hypocrites. They say, "Oh, we need free speech," but then someone goes against their narrative, and suddenly free speech is the worst thing ever. But regardless, I personally think, Reddit's pretty much all just national politics at this point. There are tons of subs to discuss that. I don't know why you feel like you need your local and state subreddits need to discuss it as well. and it's like the meme, the city, and it's like the city, and it's just a normal picture of a city, and it's the city subreddit. It's all a bunch of blue-haired woke people going ah, and yeah, it just goes to show you how Reddit's just become such a leftist, obnoxious leftist progressive echo chamber at this point for the vast majority of subreddits. That if you can't say Orange Man bad on literally every subreddit, suddenly that subreddit is a fascist is a fascist breeding ground, and it's just these people, they just want an echo chamber, and that's increasingly what Reddit is. It's all just Orange Man bad, Tesla Man bad every single day, and yeah, I personally think if the moderates should be able to enforce whatever policies they want, and I personally think banning national politics is a good idea. I would say I'm personally for free speech, but there's so much national politics in already all the other subreddits. I don't know why they feel the need to have it on their subreddits on there as well. Then we have the current state of the GOP, and that's the GOP elephant fish is being eaten by a Trump fish, and then it's a GOP elephant fish is being eaten by a Trump fish, and then the Trump fish is being eaten by a Musk fish. And yeah, that was by FunCow321. I think their bio says they're a Trump supporter, so this is kind of an anti-Trump cartoon, I guess, saying he's in Musk's pocket. But share whatever you want to. I personally think I already get enough of Orange Man bad, Tesla Man bad. That's pretty much all the Democrats say at this point. It's Orange Man bad, Tesla Man bad, and occasionally they yell Russia, 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 Putin bad. But other than that, they seemingly have no values other than those at this point. Then we have woman dragged from North Idaho Republican town hall by unknown allegedly hired security for allegedly verbally attacking legislators. Local Republican officials later could not identify the security company hired, and that's from Donkey across from the Global News Hub subreddit. And yeah, I personally think using force against anyone isn't very libertarian, especially if they're not actively using force in the first place. But ultimately, those in positions of authority will justify whatever they want to, and sometimes you just have to cope with it. Then we have, you're being targeted by disinformation networks that are vastly more effective than you realize, and they're making you more hateful and depressed from Ninja Lover, and that's crosspost from the Self subreddit. And yeah, it's a huge wall of text, yada yada yada, saying pretty much Russia is having all these astroturfing, all these things on both the political left and right. And yeah, I personally do think Russian astroturfing is a thing. But whenever it comes to Reddit, they always say Russia. They never say China, or what I think is probably the most severe astroturfing, DNC astroturfing, because DNC astroturfing seems to be the vast majority of Reddit these days. But yeah, I definitely would disagree that's only Russia doing it. But I definitely would agree that increasingly the internet is just astroturfed AI bot garbage designed to radicalize people. And yeah, I personally don't really care for it, but that's free speech. If I personally don't care for propaganda and all the bots on Reddit, but ultimately they do both fall under free speech, and that's how sometimes it goes. Sometimes you might have groups that post things you don't like, and something you just have to cope with it. And yeah, that's my thoughts on that issue. Then we have new FBI director damaging on liberals. They're not ready for what comes next. Mocks checks and balances from boingboing.net by Tom 13. And yeah, hopefully he's not they're not going to weaponize the FBI against liberals. But they always say the FBI is going to be weaponized against whoever the outgroup currently is. But I would say the big problem with the FBI and CIA and all the governments is that it's weaponized against the people rather than it's weaponized against a certain branch of the people. And that's my thoughts on that issue. And we have update on Town Hall Chaos. Woman who was dragged out speaks police chief condemns security. Name of security firm confirmed from CDApress.com by CH Warlocks. And yeah, as I said earlier, I personally don't really care for what they did, but hopefully they'll face consequences for it. But that doesn't seem to happen these days. No one ever seems to face consequences as long as they're on the side of the state. Then we have Papers, Please from Coat.com by Ragnarok KXG, and that's crossovers from the New Mexico subreddit. Lost groups of students on bus questioned by Border Patrol. And yeah, ultimately, I personally don't really care for a border patrol or any government agency. But if that was a public school bus, they're already on public government property. So if the government wants to have another government branch question them, ultimately they can justify whatever they want to, and sometimes there's nothing you can do about it. And I think we're gonna wrap it up there. I'll see you guys in the next episode. Bye.